Hello class, this is Dr. Good. Again, I apologize as I noted in my email and my other communications about canceling class on Monday. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with me, but definitely not feeling the greatest. So as a result, you're not on camera. I apologize for that. And I think actually my announcement from this week was an old announcement, so I'm sure if you watched in there, you saw the Zoom meeting date was a different date, but everything else is the same. But I do apologize, and let's move forward. So this is what I was going to cover in class. You're going to see throughout the slides, sometimes there might be various questions that I was going to open up more for the group format. And at the end, I also like to usually do a breakout. As a result, this recording is going to be shorter because we won't have that interactive component. But within your summary reflection, I would really appreciate it if you did answer some of these questions, okay? All right, moving forward, here are the different housekeeping options or the different things I like to talk about, usually at the start of this week. I'd like to mention about the FOOP assignment and that it was really great to see and to be a part of that experience. I know it can be a very difficult assignment for students or a very enlightening assignment or somewhere in the middle, but I just wanted to say I appreciate your vulnerability. We're going to see that the process is definitely a unique process, as this isn't something you would do with your client necessarily within the dual relationship that you had with your interviewee. So it is a balance of emotions between working to sort through assignment expectations, the emotions that you're feeling, because you are a part of the family system that you are analyzing and conceptualizing with the various theories that you chose. And you're going to notice too that it's just a different process, but it is a good practice. And I really hope that it did hone in on how complicated and complex family systems are. Everyone is different and unique. With film TV case conceptualization, I'm hoping that you enjoyed this process as well. As I've echoed before in other classes, this is very much so parallel to what you will do in the quote-unquote real world. You're going to be reviewing cases with other practitioners like this, like you did within this assignment, and I'm hopeful that you could see that as a really important process as you completed this assignment with your peers as well, that you could see how your view and your perspective with the theories that you chose is one option, but there's always other doorways and pathways to consider when working with individuals, couples, and families. I hope you enjoyed it. The question I have here that I like to open up with usually is, what is something that stood out to you in this last week? If you want to answer that in your reflection, that would be great. And then I just have at the bottom, usually I like to open up if there's any sort of questions or comments. Towards the very end of this recording, I am going to ask for you to have a reflection of the course, but we'll cover that at that time period. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of things. So today in our Zoom meeting, we're going to talk about brief family therapy. And the first slide here denotes what is brief family therapy anyways? And there's a lot of different questions up there. Is it 1 session, 5 sessions, 10, 15, more? So that's a question I like to ask the class is, how many sessions are considered brief? What would you say? And was this brief therapy all about? Is there more to it? So think about that. How many sessions is considered brief? We'll talk about that in a few slides here. And what is it all about? What I usually like to say as I'm looking at this slide is it's really, truly one of the approaches that is most user-friendly to a lot of clinicians. It's great for working with families, great for working with teens, kids, couples, and also really great in schools. It's really useful because it can be used in multiple realms. And it's a good tool to have in your back pocket because in reality, we never know how long we're going to have access to these people that we work with. And as a result, we need to always be thinking that this could be the end point. within that. So being smart and efficient with the time that we have with our clients. We'll get back to the number that I posed to, but as you look at this slide, you can see that a lot of what we see within this model is very clear, directive. There's specific objectives. We're going to have directive techniques. Sometimes this actually bothers students because there's a lot of different theories and modalities that are more non-directive within their techniques, but this is much more directive and solution or problem focused. There's a clear plan, so working to really cut to the objectives in the plan and working on treatment of the symptoms. As I noted before, this is another area that sometimes really troubles folks as well because they want to dig deeper, but within the brief family therapy models, we are not looking to dig things up. We're looking at the symptoms and how we can treat them. Working to set goals that are impossible to fail, making this a collaborative approach with our clients. And this model, based on systems theory, originates from postmodern thought, where we really look at language and narration, the nuances of words and what words are meant. And then you can see a quote there at the very bottom. It denotes it's limited with specific goals, along with maintaining clear, specific focus with clearly defined outcomes. Some brief therapy isms that you will hear as you're looking into these models and specifically how they apply within the systems approach. Always change a losing game. So we know what is happening in these systems usually is not working. And as a result, we need to do something different. If it's not working, do something different. This can be a challenge, as I've noted in previous classes or within the various materials, because where the family is at, their homeostasis is what they know, and it might not be working for them, but it is the known. So working to change that losing game can be definitely harder than it sounds. Working to utilize what the client brings with him or her to meet their needs in such a way that the client can make a satisfactory life for themselves. So back to that collaborative nature. We are collaborative. The client, the individual, the system, they bring what they bring to us, and we collaborate on that, looking at those strengths, looking at the ways that they've already worked towards making healthy changes or healthy patterns. We're letting the clients know that they need to be engaged. It is their lives, it is their family, it's their relationships, and they must be involved to help themselves. And then last ism up there, they can start the change process before the first session. Working to ask that question of how would they like their life to be different, what might need to occur for their life to be improved. They are in the driver's seat and have the capacity to change and need to start looking at what that change looks like. Oh, you're saying, Dr. Good, I thought you were talking about number of sessions. You said that a few slides ago. All right, so that question of what is the modal number of sessions, it denotes 5 for brief family therapy. A stat up there that's really important, I think, to think about and to really ponder. Less than 5 sessions are attended by 75 to 80% of clients. Again, let that sink in. Less than 5 sessions are attended by 75 to 80% of the clinicians. We never know how long we'll have with our client. If you're anything like me, I'm not like this much anymore, but in my beginning stages, I would come up with a plan, and this would be great. And I had a lot of passion and excitement about what therapy was going to look like with this client. I think part of it, as I've shared in other classes and possibly this class, was to fuel my anxiety, to over-prepare, instead of being present and working on what needs to be worked on in that moment. So the average number of sessions is 4 to 8. And the question out there at the bottom, if we think in terms of working with a client and thinking about 4 to 8 sessions, does that change how you would work with them, knowing the frequency of visits? If you knew you only had them 4 sessions, maybe 1 month, would that change how you would approach working with a client? All right, I'm going to pause here because I'm going to pull up a video, actually, I'm first going to introduce what I want you to do, and then I will pull up a video. I would like for you to get a piece of paper out and draw these 9 dots on the paper. This is called the 9-dot problem. It's a bit of a game, but again, go ahead and draw those dots on a paper. And after you've grouped them as you see there's the rules that are located on that slide. You must draw 4 straight lines to connect all the dots, and while doing so, you cannot lift your pen or pencil from the paper. Again, draw 4 straight lines connecting all the dots, and when you're doing so, you cannot lift your pen or pencil from the paper. All right, so work on that. And as you're working on that, I'm going to pause and I'm going to show you the answer. But you can pause me if you want as you're working on trying to figure out this approach, as I am pulling up a video to show you the answer. All right, hopefully you've had some time to work on it. I'm not really sure if the audio is going to pick up as I am reviewing this video. You don't really need to hear the audio, and maybe I will say some of the things that the person is saying, but here's going to be the solution to the 9-dot solution problem. Here we go. They're going to show several of the ways that the individual had attempted to purchase. Noted if you see boundaries on this 9-dot page, it would be impossible to solve. She states the only way to solve the puzzle would be to think outside the box, and there are so many different boundaries that we work to take in place that inhibit us from reaching success. It notes that instead we need to work to think out the box and not to feel constrained by boundaries. All right, it's talking about considering ways to think outside the box and figure out a solution to this puzzle. Working to minimize perceptions and boundaries seeming non-existent. Working to think outside the box. So there's the solution. Let me stop that. I'm going to pause to get back to our PowerPoint. So that was the 9-dot solution. I'm sorry if, as I was talking over the recording, if I was jumbled at all. I was hearing what she was saying and trying to repeat it to you all. But basically, this is a great approach when thinking about the brief family therapy model. Families are stuck in patterns that are simply not working for them. As a result, we need to work with them in a collaborative manner to think outside the box. The families are already attempting those various different patterns, as you probably, hopefully, were trying to do with the 9-dot problem as well, and it wasn't getting them solution. So instead of continuing to exhibit a pattern that is not a healthy manner or reaching a solution, we need to work to think outside the box. All right, here you're going to see several different steps. Very much so seems to be aligned with the scientific model in many different ways. But when we're looking at the solution-focused approach, as I noted before, it is very directive. So the first step is to define the problem. That might sound simple, but it is not. Sometimes if you have one person in front of you in treatment and you start to work on therapy goals and what you would like to establish in your time together, individuals struggle. So now we're going to add 1, 2, 5 more people in the room, and you're trying to define the problem, it becomes difficult as well. So working to define the problem is step number 1. Second goal, we should fall in line nicely if we define the problem well. So we're establishing the goal of therapy, working to figure out what do we want to work on in here as a family system. Number 3, we want to look at what did you try in the past? What were some attempted solutions? This is important, especially if they've been in therapy before, because you can lean on maybe things that were successful, and then you'll know what didn't work during that previous time period as well. So what have they tried so far? As you're gaining information from that, you can start to also get different themes or main themes of the attempted solution. This will help you to explore maybe why it didn't work, and that theme could be worked into treatment if need be as well. Design and intervention, as I've noted many times, this needs to be collaborative. If we don't have a collaborative process in place, the families won't feel like they are part of the process. So design an intervention, eliciting the client's cooperation. Sometimes this is a challenge as changes start to occur. The family's going to feel this effect, and certain individuals may not exhibit cooperation. So you want to do your best to engage everyone and make them a part of the treatment process. Monitor their progress and terminate. So once again, going outside, solutions, making sure that we are not going to those different prescribed notions, going outside the lines and working to provide meaningful change, working to think outside of the box, not within the constraints and boundaries that this family has been in because it's not working for them. Some other different concepts to think about as we're looking at the solution-focused-based orientation. A lot with therapist maneuverability, for example, the one's downsmanship. So we're not asking you to put yourself down, but this helps to show a difference in power. We hold a lot of power in the role as a clinician. We might not recognize it, but we do. We have individuals that are coming to us that are vulnerable and sharing their pain. And we need to make sure that the client or clients feel comfortable with us trying to work on maneuvering and moving that power. Perhaps, and maybe you've noticed me do this in class before, you might make a joke about yourself. It's not self-depreciatory in nature. We don't want to minimize your role, but to show that you are human and that you're going to make mistakes too. I mean, I'm sure in this lecture alone, I've made mistakes, and that's okay. There's a fine line, though, to make sure you're not depreciating yourself, minimizing your role, and to make yourself seem human too. So physically, we can take a one's downsmanship as well. Perhaps how we're sitting, our positioning, our posture too. A lot of things to think about. We are also thinking about the initial interview within this model, making sure to ask what is the problem, how did you come to call me at this particular time you did, remembering that questions, language, very nuanced part of this approach too, digging in on their language and being specific about those questions. Having that goal. We're going to work on this goal, and then we've resolved that. We can work and talk about what you want to work on next. So there's many different steps that you can work towards, and this will help the client too as you're focusing on that one goal to focus in treatment and hopefully not go off onto too many goat trails or rabbit trails within their treatment pathway. Termination, stay with that original goal. As I was alluding to before, you're not going to dig deep. Less breath due to the brevity within the relationship. We're trying to help our clients find and experience success, and the hope is that once we find something that these families are doing well, we can work to modify this and be successful and then move on to something else. Or perhaps part of this new pattern, this change, has helped the individual or the family system to develop other strategies and skills for other areas of their life as well. All right. We're getting towards the end of what I have prepared. And something I like to read is The African Violet Queen of Milwaukee Dies, Mourned by Thousands. It is a little story, and I like to read it because I feel like it does a nice job of capturing the essence of the brief approach. I'm going to read it to you, and then in your reflection for your makeup assignment, your alternative assignment, I would like you to tell me what you think of this approach. Okay, here we go. An African violet, here we go. All right. Milton Erickson, a now deceased psychiatrist, once went to the home of a friend in Milwaukee. His friend had a Christian aunt there who was very old and very wealthy. She lived in a huge Victorian home with incredible antiques, but his friend was concerned because she was depressed. And so Dr. Erickson went to the home of his friend's request to visit this aunt. The aunt took him on a tour of her entire home. All the blinds were closed. It was dark, gloomy, and depressing. The last place she took him to was bright and a cheery room filled of gorgeous African violet plants. It was in stark contrast to the rest of the house. Standing in the beautiful room, Dr. Erickson felt compelled to ask. "I can see what your problem is," he began. "What do you mean?" said the old woman, confused. Looking deep into her eyes, he simply stated, "You are not really a very good Christian." Completely insulted, the depressed woman finally managed to ask, "What do you mean?" "Here you have this great gift for growing African violets," Dr. Erickson gently explained, "and you keep it all to yourself. If I were you, I would get your church bulletin, and whenever someone had a birthday, or a death, or a wedding, or an anniversary, or whatever, I would take them one of your beautiful African violet plants as a gift." After that advice, Dr. Erickson left and never spoke to the old woman again. As Dr. Erickson told this story to a group of students, he pulled out an old yellow Milwaukee newspaper article. The headline read, "African Violet Queen of Milwaukee Dies, Mourned by Thousands." As usual, a curious student raised his hand and asked, "Why did you have her give out plants instead of treating her depression?" After a short pause, the wise teacher explained, "I decided that it would be easier to grow the African violet part of her life than to weed out her depression." So what do you think? What do you think about that approach? The thing I always like to say, because usually I have students talk right now, is at times of illness, at times when we're struggling, illness becomes the form of full treatment. We recognize that she's depressed. Depression was a part of her, but it was not her life. I might have mentioned in other classes, if you've had it with me, that I like to explain to my clients, individuals, that we're like a quilt, basically, and one patch on that quilt might have been depression, but there's so many other parts, and a big part being her ability to grow these African violet plants. That's a huge part of her, and other parts of her church membership. So it's not a blanket where she's just depression, but part of her life is living with her depression and working instead to focus on these are these beautiful things that you have and you do for people, and let's focus on that. And by doing so, it helped her to come back to life. I'm just curious what you thought about that. I think it's really good narration of this approach in ways that we can focus on outside the box and also strengths to help individuals. Now, that being said, I usually always have a student ask, well, I understand this, but what if there is some deeper pain or things that need to be addressed? Well, if there's trauma, if there's different kinds of addictions, if there's some other deeper seated things, this approach likely will not be most effective. It could help with some of the different symptom reduction, but there's going to be certain situations where we're going to need to utilize other approaches. But this approach definitely is helpful for many different reasons and for many situations and systems. All right, just a few techniques to review within this. The confusion technique by Deshager, I'm not going to talk about that too much because it's kind of confusing to even describe, but it's based on a play of words. You should be really confident if you're going to try to use the confusion technique, because if you don't, it could go really bad. But really working to have understood by the reader, really not understood by the listener, using often in hypnosis. When there's something confusing happening, the attention gates beliefs of our mind are wide open. And when we become confused, we have nothing to match it with because everything feels unfamiliar and unexpected or beyond the powers of understanding. So clinicians may confuse or surprise to help open up the mind for learning. If it works, don't fix it. Tying into those strengths, those things that are going well to focus upon. The death of resistance, helping to connect and have all individuals engaged that something needs to change, which can be hard. Only small change is needed. The idea that small change is still change. We recognize we have eyes for that. We know those changes, helping the clients, the couples, the families to see that we are making changes. Often people want that magic wand to wave and be at that finish line, but we have to make steps to get there. Having those eyes for that, so you can see, I see success because you are here. You came to therapy, helping them to recognize those small steps of success, and then recognizing it to help them to see the change is occurring. Do something different. So if it works, don't fix it. And if it's not working, we should do something different. Brainstorming sessions. How you keep doing the same thing over, and it's getting the same results. Collaborating, then we agree we're going to do something different because this isn't healthy and we're not happy. Scaling. I love scaling questions, and I use them most every session. They're so easy to do. For instance, I will say to my clients, scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, 1 being the best, or vice versa. Just make sure you're consistent. Where's your depression today? Where's your anxiety today? It's such an easy process. Has the clients tune into how they're feeling, increasing insight. And then it also helps you to gauge the client. I mean, if you had a client who was at a 3, being very low depression, and then they come in the next week at a 7, okay, what happened? Let's figure out what's going on here. It really helps you to gain access to how they're doing, how treatment's going as well. The crystal ball question. We've kind of talked about that already, but that really helps to elicit what the family wants to look like. Miracle question, questions that are, again, very important, and then to key on the language that is being asked. Just talked about this, but language theory being the basis for how questions are developed. I love to write down statements as individuals are talking and then to use their words, especially if they start to develop some sort of metaphor. I think that can be super powerful for them. That first session formula task, asking the client, between now and the next time we meet, I would like for you to observe so that you can describe to us next time what happens in your family, marriage, relationship, life that you want to continue to happen. This might sound simple, but it's really important for individuals to do this. As families are able to tune into what's going well, they can start to see, hey, it's not a total disaster. We do have this going for us. We do have this going for us. And sometimes this will help to provide that solution as to how to move within the roadmap of treatment as well. But it's a great question. It has the possibility and the potential to open so many doorways. All right, that is the end of my part of this course where I like to review the brief model. I'm sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. Usually at this point in time, sometimes if we have time, I send you to breakout rooms to talk about some of these things. If not, we just do it in a larger group. But I always like to hear about the FOOP assignment. How was it for you to share with your classmates too? Because you're going to find just some people in class had the same kind of emotional response that you did. And that's validating to hear. So I apologize that we didn't have the ability to do so as a result of how I'm feeling. And how do you think this experience, the FOOP project, has made you or make you a better clinician? So what about this process do you think you'll take with you and will help you during your own personal growth? And then finally, I'd like to hear about this too. And as I've said many times, I know sometimes students fill out the student survey. Sometimes they don't. Please make sure you do that. So put what you liked, what you didn't like about the class, what you liked, what you didn't like about me, and so on. And all the information, once the class is over, does get shared with me in a summary. The information from student surveys also gets sent to administration of our programs. They like to look at it to determine whether adjunct faculty are doing well, if they should continue to teach within the program too. It's really important to look at, and as I noted, I will review it at the end of when the class is already over. I don't get sent it till like 2 weeks later, so it will be sometime in the new year probably that I get sent the evaluation results. But please do fill it out. In the meantime, I do like to usually have some time at the end of class to provide the opportunity for you to reflect on what you liked, what you didn't like, again, about me, the assignments, the Zoom sessions, and so on. So if you wouldn't mind doing that in your reflection, that would be great. You are not forced to do so. I do not force my students to do that when we have a synchronous class, so I'm not going to force you now either. And if you do have any sort of constructive feedback or areas for growth from me or this class, please know I'm not going to have this side note say -5 points or something, or I'm not going to add 5 points if you've given me some glowing feedback too. But that is it. I hope you've enjoyed this class. I hope that it has been a growth process for you in many different ways, and I hope to see you in the future too. Have a wonderful holiday break, holiday season. Please reach out to me if you need to at all during this final week of class, and I hope to see you in the future. Thank you. Bye.